In the year of our Lord, 2025, on June 22nd, we are broadcasting this, waking up the next morning after bombs fell on Iran. Is this going to be a world-shifting historical event or just a blip on the radar that passes by in 2 months? We don't know. We're going to see. We thought about all sorts of different ways to approach the subject. I think a serious approach and some sobriety is necessary. But we are also going to talk a little bit about the land crisis here in America, the sale of public lands. How does it affect us, and what should we be looking for, and what should we be worried about, if anything at all? We're going to talk about that. And also some Nicki Knows Facts and a little bit of the Great Divorce. We're going to be looking at the state of the human heart. Can you let go of your ego and let Christ in? All of that here today on Further Every Day. Howdy, Jonathan Fiala for Further Every Day, sitting in the chair of philosophy and hosting today. To my right, I got Miss Nicki in the chair of theology.
Hi, how are you?
Well, and you?
It's a good day.
It's a good day.
It's a good day.
We're all here. We're alive. We're on this side of the soil. More than we could say for some Iranian nuclear scientists. But moving to the left, how's it going, Charlie?
It is going well. Happy Sunday to all.
For those of you on audio, he's in the chair of culture. To his left, we got Steve. How's it going?
Doing all right, man.
Yeah, okay.
Doing
Peace.
good. Yes, sir.
Trump hand, and then peace. Okay, I got you. In the chair of politics, and then we got Ryan.
Doing good.
Hey,
Producer.
guys.
How's it going, bro?
I'm good. How are you, John Arthur?
Glad to have you there. That's how I'm doing. I am glad. So, all right, cut number one, Mr. Producer. Cut number one. We return to this is somehow my tax dollars and also the Iron Dome, my tax dollars. As an American, we're going to talk about this, but I'm going to give you 5 reasons. Thank you, Mr. Producer. 5 reasons why I believe that the strikes on Iran were not an Israel first, but were an American first policy. A lot of people are unhappy today that we moved on Iran and we wiped out. By the way, we didn't wipe out Iran. We didn't hit any cities. We hit Fordo, Natanz, and
Isfahan.
Nisfaha. It's hard to say. Nisfaha. We hit those 3 facilities only in a surgical strike, and we were in and out before they even knew it. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why I believe that this was in America's interest. I didn't want us to have to do this, and I think Trump didn't want to have to do it. For all of the MAGA folks who want to leave MAGA now, let President Trump cook for a little bit longer. Let's see what happens. I'm going to give you 5 reasons. 1, this is in America's interest. The number 1 sponsor of state-sponsored terror, Iran, broke its treaty. They broke the treaty for their own nuclear facilities. They were supposed to not enrich uranium past a certain point. What do you expect the leader of the free world to do? What do you expect him to do? Okay, so we're going to talk about that more, and I want everyone to be thinking about that question. I'm going to lay out five things, and then we're going to get to some of the news on this. Okay, number 2, what do you think was going to happen in the region if we allowed Iran to get nukes? Do you think Qatar and Saudi Arabia and these other nations wouldn't start to think about it if we allowed them to violate the treaty? Just a question. Number 3, wasn't the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons a Democrat talking point for 80 years? Trump just stopped nuclear proliferation. By the way, he's a Democrat from 20 years ago. That's really what Trump is. I think he's becoming more conservative.
A lot of people don't know that.
Number 4, no one's looking at Russia. Russia and Ukraine, what does Russia need right now more than ever? Deterrence. They need to know that we can act. And number 5, more concerning than Russia. I'm not so concerned about Russia. I'm much more concerned about, no one's talking about this, China. We're going to get into all of that and why this strike, as regrettable as it is that we had to do it, they backed the United States into the corner. They backed Trump into the corner. He had to do this to get out of the corner. I think it was the reasonable right thing. So let's lay out. Last night, Fox News had this video, and I think it lays out pretty well what the thoughts were before we knew what was going to happen, and before we had the full address from President Trump. It's going to elucidate a little bit. Mr. Producer, go ahead and put up YouTube video number 1, please.
Strikes against Iran's nuclear enrichment sites, 3 in all in Isfahan, Fordo, and Natanz. And you mentioned the 6 bunker-busting bombs, Sean, that the president told you about. That means 3 B-2 bombers were involved in the strikes tonight because each B-2 bomber can only carry 2 of those 15-ton bunker-busting bombs. So that means 3 B-2 bombers were involved. And as we heard from Jennifer's reporting, it's likely deception was involved. Everyone woke up this morning to chatter about these 6 B-2 bombers flying west over the Pacific, refueling over Hawaii at about 11 p.m. It's clear now that those were decoys and that another flight of B-2s flew east, like 3 of them. When you said 6 bunker-busting bombs were dropped, that flight that went east went to the target and annihilated Fordo, as we're hearing, likely destroying Iran's nuclear enrichment program. As you mentioned, for 11 years, President Trump has made clear that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. That was his red line, and tonight he enforced it. You mentioned the 30 Tomahawks fired from submarines. Of course, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, the old Ohio-class ballistic missile subs that were converted, Sean, each one carries 154 Tomahawks, so it's likely the strike came from there. Not sure if USS Georgia or Florida is patrolling in the area, but those are converted Ohio-class boats. Of course, attack submarines typically carry Virginia-class, LA-class attack boats carry about a dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles. So it could have been a pair of attack submarines, or most likely one of those converted Ohio-class guided missile submarines that took out that site. What's notable, Sean, is today President Trump had 3 opportunities to address the press. He declined each time. Perhaps a signal, looking back, that something was up. And of course, he always speaks to the press. And also, let's not forget, just a few days ago on Thursday in the White House, Caroline Leavitt at the podium said she had a message from President Trump. She said that a decision on Iran will be made within 2 weeks. And now it is very clear. There's a lot of emphasis on the word within, because we're now just 2 days since that statement. And this unprecedented strike was made against Iran, knocking out Iran's nuclear sites, likely setting back that program for years, decades, or perhaps ever.
And Lucas, we got to remember.
So I think that's going to do 3 things. There's several things that are embedded in that timeline that I think are important. You have within 2 weeks, no response. What do you think that does for deterrence when 2 or 4 days later, we have bombs dropped? What does that do for deterrence?
Keeps you on edge. It makes you think twice.
Also, Trump is probably the single most open, transparent presidency we have ever seen. When he disappears for 3 hours, for 4 hours, for 12 hours, people are going to start to wonder,
what's going on?
What's he doing?
I think that is probably one of the most profound points that we could make about Trump, because what is it that every president campaigns on? We'll be transparent. We'll be transparent. Joe Biden campaigned on that, and he was the complete opposite. He was not transparent. When you look at everything that has happened since Trump has taken over as president, I have to say, this is my personal opinion. I can't speak for a lot of presidents before Nixon. I have to say that Trump has probably been the most transparent president that I have ever seen since I've been alive.
Yes.
No doubt.
And so people are going to start to wonder. And this is a good thing for America. No matter how much you hate Israel or how much you love Israel or how indifferent you are to what's going on in the Middle East, we just set the precedent that if you see Donald Trump missing for half a day, maybe there's a problem. And maybe you need to start thinking about what's going on. That's a double-edged sword, but I think on the overall, it provides to Trump's unpredictability.
And I think that I was just going to raise this point. Trump, to me, his foreign doctrine is very clear. Very clear. Any world leader that is walking this planet right now and does not understand crystally, I mean, very vividly,
correct,
what Trump is all about in a foreign policy, they've got their head in the sand because he
He's
is
been
secretive
talking
when he
about
needs. Yeah, he is secretive when he needs to be, but when he says something, he means it, and he's going to stand by it. And he did last night.
So and again, this is an apologetics channel. Mean what you say what you mean. And you know what? That's part of good policy.
And be ready to defend it, and he is.
And be ready to defend it and your people. Trump laid that out in the campaign. He's been anti-war, but he dropped the Moab on his first term. He assassinated Soleimani. Okay. This guy is a string through peace guy. I have a lot of friends, good friends, some of them with very big names, who are very upset that Trump is doing this in the Middle East. And I would say to them, and I would say to everyone else who is worried about Trump being a hawk. I don't think he's a hawk.
No.
I think he's something else. He's also not a dove. If
Amen.
you think he's a dove, I think you've missed it. He wants to protect America's interests.
He's
Can't say the
balanced.
same about all of these politicians. And we're going to get to Ted Cruz, who actually I've met the Cruz family. I've worked with them on the campaign trail. If you've been living under a rock, you've missed one of the single most disastrous interviews I have ever seen for a politician. We're going to talk about that today. But before we get there, I think we should go and we should actually hear from Donald Trump himself as to what he said. And I want you to listen to the end of this video, because at the end of this video, you hear Donald Trump say something very interesting. And I think it could herald some prophetic meanings. I'm not big on claiming prophecy, but I think it's interesting and it's valuable to note what is happening with the leader of the United States right now. And what he says at the very end of this clip is important. Mr. Producer, go ahead and play it, please. It's taken a while there.
Thank you very much.
This is from last night.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
I hope so.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far. and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Producer. Now, did y'all hear that? Trump is no theologian. Okay? No one voted for Trump because they thought he was a theologian. Really, I don't think very many people voted for him because they thought he was some sort of Christian.
Agreed.
But what's interesting to me is that unscripted, very Trump-esque, very, very clearly out of the spur of the moment, the feeling of his heart. We want to thank God. God bless our troops, keep them safe. That's interesting. And I sincerely do not believe that that was Trump in 2016. Now, I want to be careful. We talked about this before we got on air. I want to be careful that we're always saying prophecy is always fulfilled as God promised, but not necessarily as interpreted, right? God prophesies through his prophets, through his scripture, through his word, and there is then the reality that we don't really necessarily know exactly how to interpret that 100% of the time. I think it's interesting, though, that a lot of people have compared Trump to Nebuchadnezzar, who had a change of heart.
Big change.
You had the lion who had the wings of an eagle. His feathers were plucked. Then he was made to stand like a man. He was given the heart of a man. Nebuchadnezzar fell from grace, had 7 years of regency that ruled over while he was gone, a wicked reign that brought his kingdom down low. And then he was restored. And he took on a new name. And the Aramaic or Babylonian name means God be praised. And he ruled for additional 13 years, the rest of his term. President Trump was very, very much, look at what I've done. Look at what MAGA has done. Look at what the movement I have made. Look at the country that I've made. His presidency was ripped away from him. Wicked people ruled when he was down. And now, 6 months into his term, we see the first huge military victory given to him. And what does he say? I'd like to thank God.
And I think Butler, Pennsylvania might have been the pivotal moment for that change.
I don't know.
I believe that.
I think he might actually be sincere. I think he might be. I want to be very careful. I just say, so by the way, if you are one of our regular listeners, hundreds of thousands of downloads anywhere podcasts are found further every day. Thank you guys for being there. Rumble, YouTube, thank you guys for being there. We are live on Sundays, 1 to 3 Central Time, every Sunday on PSB at DLive, Rumble, and Vaughn.live. Someone said that he's pandering to the Christian base.
Oh, no.
And look, maybe open on Midwest, maybe.
I'll refute that in a minute.
But what I would say is, at the very minimum, I like hearing the leader, even if he is pandering. That's what I believe. If you're going to represent me, say the things that I believe. I want you to believe them too. I don't want to be lied to. But at the very minimum, I want you to say, we want to thank God. He says we. He didn't say I. He said we. So at the very minimum, that's correct. Because I do thank God that the air service members, Space Force, whoever was in the air in those B-2s was protected.
I don't know. Here's the issue that I would have with saying that Trump is pandering. Name me a time that he hasn't pandered.
Oh, yeah.
That means he's really not pandering to anybody. He's pandering to everybody. You can't make a case that he's pandering to Christians. How many are Christians united on this thing that we should?
No.
No, not even close. When you look at Democrats and Republicans right now, are they united on whether we should have bombed Iran? No, not even close. The GOP can't even agree on it. So to say that he was pandering to Christians, no. Trump is a populist. You must understand that. He is pandering to what the majority of people want. This is not an issue that is united in the Christian front.
And we don't know if this was even successful yet. I do want to play this morning in the year of our Lord, June 22nd, 2025. We did get a great debrief from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I'd like to pull up this video, Mr. Producer, and get it rolling, because it's important to know what happened and how it happened. And I think, again, wonderful transparency from this administration. I think it's important that we be aware that there are some risks going forward, Mr. Producer.
Yes. It's trying.
And you can give us wide.
At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Isfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in.
Thank you, Israelis.
At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning, local time in Iran. With the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out.
That's what we like to hear.
Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the President stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon.
We'll come back to that.
I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all three sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of fourth and fifth generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force.
Go ahead and pause that. So, by the way, link in the description on YouTube and Rumble, and on any platform you can find podcasts, you will find our links in the description, a bibliography, as always. Watch the whole thing if you like, but you're looking at AWACS, C-130s, KC-130s, F-18s, F-35s, and B-2s. We're talking 100 some odd units in the air. This was not a small operation. This was not an operation that Trump just thought of and came up with. You notice, we talked about the MOPS, the massive ordnance penetrators. MOPS, especially and specifically for Fordo, and this is why I said we'll find out. Fordo, if you've been living under a rock, is built under a rock. It's a very, very deep, in the mountain built uranium enrichment facility, or hopefully it was. These massive ordnance penetrators impact, there's a primary charge that shoots a hole straight down. The next one follows that hole down and sends a second charge, at least two charges. Do we know if Fordo has been destroyed and if that fissionable material has been destroyed? No, and we're not going to know for quite a while. Has the Iranian regime's designs on a nuclear weapon, by the way, do you think they're not going to use that nuclear weapon on the United States as well when they get to it?
Oh, they'll use it gladly. And they won't.
It's not an Israeli thing. It's an American thing. It might also be Israeli. And, you know, God bless the Hodge twins. They seem like good guys. They've got some really good takes. But they said, oh, look at Israel. They got just what they want. I was watching on X and I saw that last night. And I said, yeah, but we got what we want too. This is, make no mistake, this is an America first thing. No matter how much you dislike Israel, this was an America first issue. And I would appreciate if President Trump remained America first, but this one is America first. And by the way, love him or hate him, a lot of those SAM sites were taken out by the Israelis. Mm-hmm. So I have questions about the Israeli government. We have a diversity of opinion on this panel to some extent, but we were talking before, I don't necessarily like the Israeli government. I have questions. I have things that I think should be answered. That doesn't mean that we should, just because the Jews are getting hit, doesn't mean that we shouldn't also be looking out for the same people who were saying, we want to blacken the United States as high. I know you had something you wanted to say.
Well, there's a couple things. So one of the things is The reason that we stand so strongly with Israel is because God has made it clear, those that stand with Israel, I will stand with. Those that oppose them, I will curse.
Well,
we don't need.
watch out. Don't be careful.
Go ahead.
Because speaking about the seed of Abraham, speaking about Christ, it's a Christ. It's not a reference to the modern state of Israel. So be careful.
Yeah, I could go the opposite way with that though too.
I don't think that's a good exegesis, and so
maybe not.
We could debate it, but I think you got to be very careful applying that. I think Israel
it's a life principle, but go ahead.
I think it's a general principle. Okay. But it's referring to, and Paul in Galatians specifically lays this out. We're talking about Jesus Christ here. This is the purpose of the promise, is ultimately those who are in Christ. Now, the Israeli people, the actual Israelites, and we can debate the whole Mongol Turk thing. We can debate that. But we're grafted in to the Jewish branch as Gentiles. If you're a Christian, you are grafted into that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to make an argument that I don't even need to invoke the Bible to say that this was an America First thing. I think it is an America First thing.
I do agree with that.
I think it's also the right thing.
Yep.
Well,
because, go ahead.
If you don't agree with that this was America First thing, then you really haven't been paying attention to the history in Iran, who calls America the Great Satan. And the reason they call him the Great Satan is because we are the issue why they cannot destroy Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that if they get a nuclear weapon, they're not just going to hit Israel and think everything's going to be okay. They know, and if you listen to history with the Iranian people and their leadership, we need to bring down America first so we can get to Israel. So yes, this is America First scenario.
Yep.
And you have to look at the last 40 years, how Iran has attacked our people and our military.
I'll take it back even a little bit further than that. A lot of people, and there were some comments that I was watching on a thread last night saying they didn't think that Trump should have done this. It wasn't our business. Okay. Here's where it becomes our business. And we must go back to 1945 or a little before that. What are we involved with? It's World War II. And what's going on? We've got Hitler doing his thing, and we've got Japan doing their thing. There was a very profound moment, a very profound change in the world that happened on August 6, 1945. And ultimately it concluded with August 9th, 1945. And that was the dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan. Now, I don't wish that on anybody. And I'm not sitting here to argue one way or the other about it, other than to say this. What did the dropping of those two bombs do?
Bring the war to the end.
It's done.
Deterrence.
It's done. Yeah. There is no more of this.
Deterrence only comes through violence.
We can point to the Vietnam War and go, why didn't it deter there? Understood.
But because we didn't set deterrence with Vietnam. We kept giving them the same.
And that's a great point. We had Russia doing what? We got involved in what? The Cold War. I remember as a kid, maybe Steve, you remember this, walking out into the hallways for the air raid drills.
Yep.
And we're covering our heads.
Yep.
Why are we covering our heads? Are we going to get attacked? Is it really going to happen? That's what you're wondering as a kid. And when I say a kid, I'm talking a second grader, a third grader. You're not going to have a teacher explain to you what's going on. They can't communicate that with a second and third grader. I'm sorry. So we're talking about deterrence. We can argue all day long that this was Israel's problem. I go with John Arthur on this. I totally agree. This was not just an Israel problem. This is an America problem. And when you've got somebody that is, can I say it, hell-bent on destroying America and destroying Israel, Please do not tell me you can negotiate with those people. They have shown time
We
and
gave them
time
60
and
days.
time again.
We gave him 60 days. We gave him 60 days.
We gave him
this time.
50 years.
We gave him many, many years. We covered it last week. By the way, the Mad Stone asks on Rumble, where can you find our show? At Further Every Day on YouTube, Rumble, or anywhere you can find a podcast. At Further Every Day on any of those platforms. We covered the history of this last week, which, by the way, look at the history. Check it out. The Jews have been really, really lenient on this. I have my questions about the war in Gaza. It took 8 hours for October 7th for them to respond. I understand that. You can have all sorts of conversations about the secular regime in Israel. We can have a conversation about that. But at the end of the day, not when we deal with Israel, when we're looking at what they did in Gaza, they sent knocker bombs, give you 15, 45 minutes before that's an inert bomb. A bang bang after the F-16 flies through. No one else does that. They gave them 15 to 45 minutes to get out before they leveled the gun emplacement that was structured in that hospital. Iran just indiscriminately launches rockets into, population centers.
And
These are two different groups. Even if you don't think Israel should have been there, take it up with the Brits. Take it up with them. Go back to 1947. Build your time machine. Go kill Winston Churchill or whoever it is you need to kill, and you figure it out. Because the Brits did this in 47. Right now, we've got actual people who are dying. You can make that. We can have that debate on whether or not that was a just thing, and maybe it wasn't. We can have that conversation. Okay, I'm open to that debate. But that debate aside, for those who want to abandon the America First Trump movement, I'm just going to say this was an America First thing. I don't even consider the debate on Hamas, the Palestinian, Israeli two-state solution. It's not even an issue here. Iran was coming for us, and also they were coming for China. And I want to flip into the Tucker Carlson interview from this last week.
Hang on with that for just a moment.
Go ahead.
The one thing I do want to say.
Go ahead.
Trump even gave Tehran a warning.
Yeah.
Y'all might want to leave. And what did they do? They loaded up in the cars and they got on the road.
Yep.
What was he doing? He's telling them, we're coming. That was prophetic there for him.
Yes, it was.
At that moment. He was telling them, you all are fixing to get hit and you might want to get out of the way. I think that was very nice.
And they did.
And they did.
So I want this much war, okay? I want this much war. You know how you do this much war? You drop the bombs on Japan. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that dropping the bomb was a good thing. The bombs, what they did, there was evil and tragedy done.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That is an evil thing. The dropping of the bombs saved so many lives. And it's not that it's a utilitarian good or evil thing. We're talking about war. We're talking about an aggressor who attacked us first. And we said, we want to slow down. We killed many, 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 many more people in the fire bombings on Tokyo than we ever did with the nukes. And we could have continued that, but it would have cost lives. So we did something to set deterrence. Whether or not you agree with that, the truth is, it worked.
It ended.
I believe it's morally feasible and allowable. Otherwise, nations would not be allowed to go to war in the Bible. Israel would never have been allowed to go to war. That wouldn't have been allowed. God set horrid levels of deterrence for the Israelites to do, burning the entire village, okay? Savage times. But people knew you didn't mess with those people unless you were willing to find out.
Yeah.
You didn't screw around or else you'd find out. That's what we're looking at. And Russia and China are looking at us right now. They want to know, can they screw around or will they find out? Now,
at the very least, they found out, proceed with caution.
I think we're seeing something interesting. And I want to go to the Tucker Ted interview because it does three things. It elucidates a problem on one of the two sides of the conservative movement. We do have an issue with foreign interest in American politics, period.
Yep.
I have met the Cruz family. I have done things on the campaign trail for them. I adore that family, and I've gotten to know on many occasions Ted Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz is one of the coolest human beings you will ever meet. He's one of the gentlest and kindest fellows. Ted Cruz, however, performed terribly in this interview with Tucker Carlson. I am not here to savage Ted Cruz. Tucker did that well enough. And I very much like and appreciate most of what Ted Cruz has done. For the most part, he's been a very, very good Texan senator. But I believe that in believing in someone, you can also say that was not good. That was not a good showing. So we're going to look at the first video from Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson in just a second. I want to look at the issue of AIPAC, Israeli influence in America, because right now we're talking about, we're all in this room, we're all very friendly to the idea of Israel protecting itself. The opposition to folks like us is a lot of Americans are bought out by Israeli interest. That is actually true, and it's a problem. So let's address it. Mr. Producer, go ahead and pull that up. So as you listen, we're going to go through a couple of these clips, and what you hear, this was a brutal interview. Go ahead. Feel free to say pause at any time.
I'm hardly the one who, I've never taken money from the Israel lobby. Have you?
Taken money from the Israel?
From AIPAC.
So AIPAC raises a lot of money for me, but it's actually a misnomer because the people who raise money are individuals. So it's not the PAC itself, but they're individual members who believe in the American-Israeli friendship.
AIPAC, the foreign lobby.
No, it's what American lobby is. The AIPAC stands for the America-Israeli Political Action.
What does it lobby for?
So, to be honest, not a whole lot effectively. Listen, I came into Congress 13 years ago with the stated intention of being the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate. And I've worked every day to do that.
What was your intention, Senator Cruz?
That was
Texas Senator Cruz?
That was a really...
What did he
what's
just
your
say?
What's your intention? Now, he clarifies this later. Words matter, though.
Yeah.
Words,
I would have preferred you defend me first.
And he says that later. He corrects himself. However...
Cat's out of the bag.
Once you say something like that, the cat's out of the bag, it's very hard to put that cat back in. You're going to be bloody and full of hair by the time you get done shoving it back in. Cruz, you just made...
That was blunder one.
That was rough. That was rough. He's a good man, but that was not a good response at all. Go ahead.
AIPAC, a lot of times, AIPAC, I wish were much more effective. Like, they're focused on online who are in the fear swamp of terrified of AIPAC, and AIPAC...
I'm not terrified of AIPAC at all. You're the one who seems a little uncomfortable when I'm asking.
No, I'm not uncomfortable at all.
I'm just asking what AIPAC does. My understanding, having known a lot of people who work at AIPAC, is that it lobbies on behalf of the Israeli government.
Wrong.
Oh, okay.
America has thousands of colleges and universities, and a lot of them...
First one. AIPAC lobbies on the defense of Israel. Go ahead and fix that window by going to the full screen capture. Yeah, go ahead and fix that real quick.
Did he say Israeli government?
Yeah. So they should be registered as a foreign agent. That is a problem. And it is something that does need to be addressed. I think there are a lot of people who are coming out and they're saying, look, America's politics are bought and paid for. There's some influence.
Yep.
And by the way, for those of you who are saying, well, hey, I'm a Christian and I actually don't mind AIPAC supporting Israel. Look at the majority of the people that AIPAC supports. Are they conservative Republicans?
I was just going to say, you've got to know what's in that group.
It's Cory Booker. It's all these other people. All these other libs are also supported by that, more so than conservatives, because a lot of conservatives will say, on principle, I will not take your money. I will not take your $2 million because I do not support Israel over America. We need to hold our politicians to that standard. This is not acceptable.
It really begs the question, if we were to Here's a good one, and I don't know unequivocally the answer to this. What if there was a pact for Britain, for Britain's government?
I wouldn't want them. Right? I don't want them.
What about a pact for the Canadian government? I definitely don't want that. I don't care. I'm not here to bolster your government or the people involved in it. Even if they're conservative, I don't care. That's not my business.
I don't want you influencing
That's right.
my country. We want to have the talk about banning TikTok. That's a conversation that we should have.
Absolutely.
Like, should we allow a state-sponsored social media platform on the United States when it is clear that they do not believe in free speech, that they do put the more promiscuous stuff at the forefront, that they do put the CP at the forefront, if you know what I'm talking about. They put the child stuff that should not be done with children at the forefront. We should have that conversation, but really we need to look also, if we are if you're generally pro-Israel, as most people in this room are, as I think all of us are, I think I could say, we want Israel to have the right to exist. We think that's okay. You got to also be able to call balls and strikes when you see, ooh, you guys are spending a lot of money. You're trying to influence our politics. Frankly, I don't appreciate it. You should be registered as foreign agents and treated accordingly. You should have limitations. It is not cool. It is not acceptable. And unfortunately, Ted Cruz kind of let the cat out of the bag there.
I don't think he even, this is just me based on the interview.
I think he's legitimately just being forward.
Yeah,
front.
I don't think he really understands AIPAC.
Yeah, I don't think he's gotten it. So really, really like Ted Cruz. I am not dogging on him, but I do think that needs to be addressed and we need to be thinking about it. So the next cut is Ted Cruz's position on Israel. And I want you to go and pull it up, Mr. Producer. You got that all fixed up? Thank you. Go ahead and get that next one ready. Make sure it's the next one. And then let's go ahead and roll it. See if it gets here. Pause it if you want to pause.
That if you attack me, I'm going to praise you, not for things that are not praiseworthy. If I disagree with you, I will not be shy about saying it. But for things that are praiseworthy.
I remember that. It was 2013.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way. I went to his cell at the Hanoi Hilton, and
oh wow,
I agree with you about it. I just want to end by asking you specifically about what's going to happen next in Iran and what should happen next. So you've called for regime change. You've said you don't favor the U.S. military participating in any kind of regime change. You said you don't think, and bless you for saying this, that the U.S. military should try and turn it into Belgium.
Yeah.
Thank God. But there is a third option where it turns into Syria, where it's this open wound and it causes massive migration and further destroys Europe, as Syria has.
Yeah.
And that's a huge cost, and where lots of people die and religious minorities get murdered in Syria again. Are you worried about that?
Sure. And listen, that lots of bad things can happen. But going back to what we talked about, the principle of defending America, I agree with President Trump that Iran with a nuclear weapon is an unacceptable risk to
Oh, you got to be kidding me.
He was fixing to get to the good stuff.
And we need to stop it. I agree with President Trump, and I'll make a point.
But he's not for regime change.
He's not. So he and I disagree. Yeah, look, I think he thinks it would be better. He has not said he's for it. And you know what? Look, it is consequential when the President of the United States says, I'm for regime change. So I understand why he hasn't. What he has said is he's drawn a red line and said, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, and the only acceptable outcome is complete dismantlement. So they have centrifuges. They're enriching uranium right now. They're trying to develop a nuclear weapon. He said they must have complete dismantlement. I led 52 senators, Republican senators, in a letter where we said we agree with President Trump. That's the red line, complete dismantlement. I agree with President Trump. I agree with him supporting Israel, taking out Iran's military leadership, taking out their nuclear capability. And I'll point out, look, if you look the first term, I am hard-pressed to think of a single foreign policy decision Donald Trump made the first term that I disagree with. And that's not entirely accidental, because I spent a lot of time the first term in the Oval Office with him, And what happened in the first term often is you would have in the administration, you had interventionists in the administration, you had isolationists. And they disagreed. They would fight within the administration. And often what it would give is an opportunity for me to come in and say, hey, there's a middle path here that President Trump agreed with frequently. And it's worth noting, in the first term, he most assuredly was not an isolationist. Look, he took out General Soleimani, which I emphatically agree with. And in fact, I introduced a resolution that we voted on the Senate floor commending him for taking out General Soleimani, who was the leader of the IRGC and who was responsible for killing over 600 American servicemen and women. When Trump came in, ISIS had a caliphate that had grown up under Obama that was about the size of the state of Indiana. And Trump came in and utterly decimated them. He killed the terrorists, took away their caliphate, and defeated them. And he also took out Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. I mean, those are not the actions of an isolationist, but at the same time,
I don't even know what isolationist is. It's just a slur designed to control. I mean, I've never met an isolationist. I don't even know what that means.
Okay, Rand Paul is my colleague. Rand is an isolationist. And Tucker, you've become one, and I don't mean it as a slur. You consistently say, you have said, actually, I want to read from your newsletter.
Pause. Rand would not have killed Soleimani. He would never have done that. Tucker would never have killed Soleimani. He would never have dropped the Moab. He would never have moved. And it's very easy for us to sit here and talk about what we like and what we don't like. It's very hard to make a decision that you have to live with. And that's not to say that we can't have an opinion. We should. But there is a difference between the isolationist and the interventionist, and in the middle you have Trump.
I think
Ted's an interventionist.
Yes.
He's a hardcore interventionist. He is not fully boots on the ground. He is not opposed to boots on the ground, though. Trump is opposed to boots on the ground as of right now. He says, we're never going to do that.
And that's why I say...
And I quote, we're not going to do that.
Right, right. When you look at Soleimani, when you look at al-Baghdadi, my question for you is this. Did the killings of Americans dwindle?
Yeah.
Hello? Do the math. Okay? It's not hard to figure out. And I think what Cruz has pointed out is really worthwhile right here. This is probably the stronger part of his interview, because he's making the case about strength, about using... He's basically saying if you're an isolationist, you're going to live with some consequences.
Yeah,
that's what we have been doing.
We've been
doing that.
Trump's foreign policy has been the only one that has worked in my lifetime. I have watched isolationists like Barack Obama. Well, let's pay them money to not build the nukes so they can develop a nuclear infrastructure. Never mind that they also, even though they say we're doing it for energy, they're also enriching uranium far beyond reasonable limits for energy. Never mind that. That's why we have Fordo. It was done by an isolationist.
Trust him.
Which is what Tucker is proposing. If you really drill down to it, he's still an isolationist on the Barack Obama end. And then you've got G.W. Bush. Let's install a Madisonian democracy in a world that does not have the gospel, that doesn't have the Protestant work ethic, that doesn't know why freedom is valuable. I'm sorry. If you think I'm racist for saying that, I've got family and friends who have come to this nation who have accepted the ideals of freedom. And if not the religious aspect, they've accepted the Christian value structure.
The foundation of it.
The foundation of it. And they are fully American and fully capable of being American. It's not race. It's culture. You cannot install this Madisonian democracy in a world that believes that women are dogs. They're second-class citizens. You cannot install a democracy that represents the value and understands the value and enshrines it of human life when the Jew and the Christian are killed with the sword if they do not convert. They're given a chance. The pagan is absolutely killed, by the way. Jews and Christians, they're given one chance to convert or die. The pagans, you just slaughter those. Like, forget about those. So for all of you secularists and atheists out there, you fit in that box. Madisonian democracy, GW, Bush? Nah, doesn't work.
Not going to work.
What does Trump do? You create a ruckus, you're gone. I drop the mop, the massive ordnance penetrator on your facility, I wipe you out. You want to keep playing? I'm coming for you next. That works. It's the only thing that's worked in the Middle East because it's force.
And I think the interesting thing about that statement right there is that in his statements last night, in that press release, he's making it clear we took care of stuff tonight. If you do anything further, we will come at you even harder, and it will be far easier. What was it that Trump said very early in the week? We know where you're at.
Yep.
That has to be kind of a chilling statement.
Yep.
The one of the greatest leaders in the free world with the greatest military, arguably the greatest military in the free world, and he's saying, we know where you're at. That had to grab some attention. And I like the fact that he said, we're not taking you out now. That was in parentheses.
Now is the time for peace.
Now is the time for peace. This is truly the Trump doctrine. He wants you to make a deal. If you were to give this president a nickname, I don't know about you, Steve, I think I would nickname him the deal or the deal maker. That's what he wants. He wants the glory of a deal. That's what he lives for.
And we need that.
Yes.
We need that president at the helm. Guys, let him cook. None of us want boots on the ground. No one in here would ever desire boots on the ground. We might be pushed into that. I think if we pray and if Trump is wise and cunning, and God gives him the grace, I think we can slip through this without having to put a single boot on the ground. That's why I started off the program by saying, is this going to be something that marks human history, a deviation in human history, or is this going to be something that we've forgotten about in 2 months? I think this guy might still pull a rabbit out of the hat. And I think we're in mid-process. His hand's in the hat. Let's see what he pulls out. I'm going to say, wait.
I agree with that. And I will also say that with him, in the way he's reacted in this whole scenario, we may do some more bomb dropping.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to.
Yeah. I really don't see boots on the ground. I just don't. Some people do.
Trump has made it very clear he wants out of the Middle East.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be there.
And him taking care of Iran's nuclear weapons, he won't feel as pressured to stay in the Middle East.
I think.
Remember this: when he came into office, what is his big thing? Hey, Europe, this problem with Iran and Russia is closer to you than to us. Start forking out some money and take care of it. Why does he want Greenland and Canada? What is he trying to do? Create an iron dome over here. We'll be so big and so massive, you can't touch us. He wants out of the Middle East.
Yeah, he does.
He does not want boots on the ground. And if you're not paying attention to what he's saying and you've got other noise in your head, it's wrong.
Because why did we talked about this before? Why are we pulling out of the Ukraine? Why are we reducing support?
Well, it's really because it's a lost battle, number one. Yep. Ukraine cannot win. And all the death, that really bothers President Trump. How many, 1 million people in Russia, 1 million soldiers have died, maybe even some civilians. It's close to that even for Ukraine. This is a useless war. Neither one is going to be happy at how this ends, and it's not worth the bloodshed. So there's the human side to.
And I also agree that war would have never happened had Trump been
there. And Ted Cruz made that point, is that they tried to stop the treaty between Germany and Russia with the pipeline.
Yep.
And unfortunately, Biden's weak, limp-wristed behavior encouraged, and I believe it was multifactorial. There were a number of different things. Sending Kamala Harris over there. Tucker brings this up, by the way. Watch the whole interview. It is interesting. It was like chewing on glass for me to watch, but there was some value. Tucker Carlson has some really good points. Kamala Harris trying to drag Ukraine into the NATO pact, and the weakness of Joe Biden allowing that pipeline to proceed in Germany to continue to buy fuel from Russia, you are funding the Russians. But the biggest issue with Ukraine, which we didn't even get to yet, the human loss.
Mm-hmm.
But remember I said Russia and China needed deterrence. Russia and China needed deterrence. What do I mean by that? Where's China right now?
They're ready to invade Taiwan.
Their eyes are on that little island that they believe is theirs and has gotten away from them. Where are we? Right off the coast of Taiwan. What did we look at? We looked at this on this podcast not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
October of 24. The admiral over the Indo-Pacific Fleet, what did he say about our magazines?
They're dry.
They're dry. We are out of missiles. We sent all of our ATACMs. We sent all of our resources to the Ukraine. We gave them all of this crap. Half of it ended up on the black market. And now, if China attacks Taiwan, which is actually an America First infrastructure, if we lose Taiwan, it is more important on a material level than Israel. Like, legitimately, orders of magnitude more damaging to American infrastructure. If we lose Taiwan, and by the way, I am all about the preservation of Israel as a country, big on that. But Ukraine, that war is a quagmire. We need to get out of it. And there literally do not exist the rockets necessary to lob at the Chinese as they come across to take over the infrastructure in Taiwan, which would cripple the West.
I'm surprised, actually.
They haven't already done it.
That they haven't already done it.
You know why? Because we have multiple carrier battle units out there. We have battle groups out there that are, and the Chinese are cute with their boats.
Yeah.
The Russians and the Chinese cannot build a boat. Like they have to dredge them up out of the ocean after they launch them because they sink. The Chinese boats suck, but they do have more than enough people and more than enough munitions and aircraft to make our lives hell. They could make a serious mockery of Taiwan, and they could make it very hard on us.
So now going back to my Russia-America Cold War, what is it that kept Russia from launching nukes?
Deterrence.
It was deterrence. It was the threat of America launching them back and nobody being able to do anything, and the total destruction of the world as we know it. And by the way, it would be. There would not be a place on the planet that could escape the nuclear radiation from attacks from two countries like that. When you look at the Chinese and Taiwan issue, what is it that's keeping them? I'm surprised they haven't done it already. And the reason I said that was because Biden was in office. Biden wouldn't care. He actually begged, that's strong. He said for Russia to go ahead and invade Ukraine. And that, I'm not far off with that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about a president who is really weak, how would Biden have responded if China had invaded Taiwan? Well, you guys shouldn't have done that. And that would have been it.
Yep.
That would have been it. So deterrence right now, because what the Chinese don't want to do is knock down a U.S. plane out of the air.
And then get
hammered the other way.
Right now, what we just delivered, whether you like Israel or not, it's FAFO big time.
Yeah.
Fun around, find out. They're in the find out arc right now, Iran is.
Yep.
And guess what? Russia and China needed that. Qatar, Saudi Arabia needed to see us enforce the nuclear treaty. Because guess where they're going to go if Iran's a nuclear power? They don't really like Iran. But if Iran's a nuclear power, and if they too can break the treaty, they could realign. These allies are and this Abraham Accord situation that Trump has developed is very tenuous. It's very fragile. It could be lost overnight. It is a serious concern.
And Saudi Arabia would be able to develop that stuff way faster
than Iran. They have the money,
faster.
the infrastructure, the power, and they have the defensive structure.
Yes.
So guess what Trump had to do? He gave him the chance. We all wanted it to be Israelis only. I think all of us in this room did not want to see American involvement. But we've waited a long time. And
one
Trump
more quick thing. What was it that Clinton didn't do when he was in office, that he had the opportunity? North Korea. And he let it be. We're paying for that.
We need to keep more of these states. It's a non-proliferation issue. This is a non-proliferation issue. If we're part of the treaty, we should be able to enforce it. I'm sorry, especially when we have a treaty on the books that they're not going to enrich uranium. So going about today, this week, going on forward as an apologetics channel, you could say, hey, maybe Israel is, maybe it is not the future Israel of the Bible. Maybe you are a partial preterist or a preterist. You believe your eschatology is that Revelation's already happened. You're an amillennialist. You believe that, the millennium reign of Jesus Christ, it's right now. So that's a little bit of a botch of it, but you understand what I'm saying. It's ad hominem a little bit, but it's the millennium. That's how I help kids to remember millennialism. It's this idea that we are living in, it's the kingdom now, kind of comes out of that, where you believe that we are currently in the kingdom of Christ, where he's reigning with a staff of iron. Sorry, I don't think so, but I understand where you're coming from.
Well,
if you're a futurist,
yesterday with a big stick.
Jesus.
Yeah, he was hanging out at the
You were
corner.
having a seizure. You were at Walmart.
Yeah.
Or Home Depot parking lot.
Yeah, he was
did it have a rake on it?
There and, yeah,
you saw
He
Jesus?
had a sign too.
God help us. Are you listening to this, Mr. Producer?
So before we end this segment right here, let the people know why this is not unconstitutional for President Trump, because you're going to hear a lot of Democrats. And let me ask you something. These Democrats know what the law is, but they're trying to gain recognition. They know that a lot of American people do not understand the laws and the executive branch, and it's just anti-Donald Trump. And so when you're out there and you're listening to, this is unconstitutional, this is impeachable, just remember, Donald Trump came into office and he spent 30 days bombing the Houthis and nobody even paid attention to it. Nobody even cared. Nobody paid attention. But explain to him why this is not unconstitutional.
Because of the War Powers Act. You don't need an act of Congress to act as the president, as the executive authority. Thank you for reminding me. As the executive authority, for those who are saying, like AOC, our precious, dear, sweet summer child AOC, Miss bug-eyed Latina who's pretty, but she's that mistake that you make at college, and you get married, and then 10 years later she takes away half of your earning, right? So the dear sweet AOC, who looks like she's more than she is, but she's rather brainless, unfortunately. Dear sweet AOC says that this is unconstitutional. Let me tell you let Charlie tell you what the War Powers Act of 1973 actually says.
And I'm going to read this, and I just pulled this up a little earlier, so we've got to make sure it gets in the show map.
Do it.
Purpose and policy. Congress declares its intent to fulfill its constitutional role in decisions involving the introduction of U.S. armed forces into hostilities. Now listen to this. The president's powers as commander-in-chief are limited by the Constitution and do not authorize unilateral military action except under 1, a declaration of war, 2, specific statutory authorization, or 3, a national emergency created by an attack upon the U.S., its territories, possessions, or armed forces. Next part, presidential reporting requirement. This is important. The president must report to Congress within 48 hours whenever U.S. forces are introduced into hostilities or imminent hostilities. That was last night. Deployed into foreign territory while equipped for combat. That was last night. Substantially enlarging the number of combat-equipped forces already abroad. That has happened with the movement of ships in the area. So he has 48 hours to get this done. It's probably already been done. Content and scope. Reports must include. Not going to go into that, although you can read about it.
It's 60 to 90 days.
This is the next part. The president must withdraw U.S. forces. Withdraw U.S. forces within 60 days with a possible 30-day extension unless Congress declares war, provides specific statutory authorization, extends the deadline. Congress can direct removal of forces via a concurrent resolution. Now, there's a little more to this, but here's one of the key things that I think we need to talk about. And this is what the politicians are all yakking about, especially Massey. Imminent threat. Okay. Now, lawmakers are really cool. They're brilliant. They're brilliant at being ambiguous. So what is a
clear
imminent threat?
Well, let me ask you the question. So I've seen this in the chat and I've heard this. By the way, if you are one of our regular listeners on YouTube or Rumble at Further Every Day or anywhere podcasts can be found, thank you. You can be in the live chat at Patriot Soapbox, PSB, at DLive, Rumble, or Vaughn.live. Someone in the chat said this, and I've seen this commonly put out there. Well, we've been hearing that Iran is going to have a nuke for the last 20 years. It's been 5 minutes and they're going to have a nuke. And that's been said for a long, long time. Yes, it has. We went over the history last week. Starting in the 80s, we started to hear this. What immediately started happening? We started knocking off their scientists. We started bombing their facilities. We started knocking off more scientists. We started putting sanctions on them. We took off sanctions from them. They got closer. We killed more scientists. Watch the whole last week's episode for the timeline. Yes, the reason why they don't have it now is because of what Trump just did yesterday and the long history of that. That's why.
Fox News did a very important interview earlier this week, had a scientist on, said that the uranium in Iran was at its 60% grade. He said, folks, you need to be very careful about that number. Yep. That number does not mean that they're only halfway there. That is an exponentially higher number. Yes. That means they're 90% there. The belief is, and I believe the Israelis are the ones that have this, that they were within days to weeks.
And the reason it's stopped each time is because the Mossad or the CIA or an airstrike killed, destroyed, blew up scientist, laboratory, or facility. Yes, we have been on the brink. You know why we've been on the brink? It's the same thing with the Palestinians. We want to complain about the Israelis confining the Palestinians. Any normal nation, say normative for the past 4,000 years of human history, any normative nation would have killed every single person in the Palestinian lobby, or any normal empire like the American empire. And we are an empire. Don't make a mistake about it. We are an imperial force. We took over the British Empire by and large. We don't act like an empire, but any past empire would have stomped Iran out in a bloody, brutal war. The reason why this is still going on is because peace has been at the forefront. Reconciliation has been at the forefront. Kindness to our neighbor, even when they chant death to our state, America. I'm talking about America right now, not Israel. The reason they're still alive for us to complain about is because we've let them live. Mm-hmm. So don't get it twisted when we say, we're going to try to let your people live, but we're going to knock off the individuals who are doing the bad things. That is Trump's policy. And in a way, that's been the way that we have operated for the past 40 years. That's why we still have endless wars in the Middle East. In previous times, we would have glassed the continent. If previous leaders, you go to Genghis Khan and give him a nuke, what do you think he's going to do?
He's going to use every one of them he's got.
Genghis was a bad example. He would have impregnated all the women anyway. But that's a different issue because, half of that whole continent is related to Genghis Khan because Genghis Khan. But bad example. Give it to Adolf Hitler or Stalin or any of these others without the restriction of these other nations. Go back to Napoleon. Mm-hmm. Go back to some of these other, to Caesar. They would have glassed the continent. We have allowed these people to live, which is the right thing, by the way. I believe it's the right thing to do. But it gives us this unusual situation where we have a conquered people group that we are attempting to install a Madisonian two-state solution, a democracy, with people who do not believe that all humans are created equal. It creates an interesting challenge. and it must be navigated. We must have debate. We must have a discussion about it. But I want you to know this is unprecedented. The amount of mercy that we have shown these people is not common. These people who believe that you are subhuman because you are not part of the Islamic Caliphate.
And that is what they believe.
And that is what they believe. They believe that we should be put to death. The Jews are despised monkeys. And I quote from the Quran. Okay, that belief system, we've allowed those people to continue to live. And now we're complaining because we're knocking off some of their scientists. I'm sorry. You either are a warmongering nation that glasses a continent or a part thereof, or we say, we'll conquer you, we'll kick you to the curb, behave, 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 and each one of those pokes is us knocking out your nuclear scientists. You can have one or the other, or you could be speaking Arabic.
You know,
pick one of the three. And that's where the MAGA movement is right now. We don't know which one to pick.
You know, one of the differences between us and historic empires, and like you say, America is an empire and have no doubt about it because of all of the different things we've done across the world and the influence we've created across the world. But like you talk about, we are not like historic empires.
Correct.
We don't go once we've done something in a country, say like what we've just done to Iran. We don't go in there
and wipe them out
and just completely wipe out everybody.
And by the way, that's why America hasn't won a war in the last 80 years.
Their entire government, everybody that stands, and then just go in and replace them all with our own people.
With our own people. That's the only reason why America hasn't won a war in the last 80 years, because we haven't been fighting to win. By the way, that's why I didn't enlist. Mm-hmm. I was not going to go under Barack Obama's rules of engagement. I've heard those stories. I was correct. I do not want to get shot at. I do not want, I was watching, what's that gentleman's name? He went by Reaper. He's one of the top snipers in Afghanistan.
Oh man!
And I can't
His
remember
name
the
escapes
gentleman's
me.
name. He's a black guy with dreads, really cool dude. And he was telling us about this one situation where he and his spotter were pinned down, and they were playing volleyball with 180 grain 30 caliber rounds back and forth. One round went between him and his buddy's helmets. Broke off, I think he said broke off nods. And that, the commander thought one of them had been bit, right? And it bit the bullet. And they're going back and forth. The reason I bring up the story, they called for air support in an abandoned building because of Barack Obama's rules of engagement. You had to have a 0.1 collateral damage, 0.1% collateral damage. So those boys were going to take all of those rounds for the hope that maybe we might save one or two innocent lives in an abandoned building. And as far as he could tell, the guy was all the way in the back of the building and looking out through the windows. He was not breaking the plane, so they could not get a beat on the guy. And they said the only thing that saved him were a bunch of jarheads that came up blasting away and evac'd them. And later on I think it was later on that day or later on that week, he lost one of his best buddies. It's on the Sean Ryan podcast. I'll put a link in the description if I can find it, because Sean Ryan was interviewing Reaper. Really, really good stuff. We've been fighting that way, and this is the result. So maybe we reconsider. Maybe if you don't like the way that we're treating the Palestinians, if you don't like the way we're treating the Iranians, maybe we just reconsider this mercy thing. How about that? Or we try to navigate it. We try to navigate it in a kind way.
Yeah, the one of the reasons we haven't been winning wars is the past 60, 70 years, all of our wars have been being fought by politicians.
Yeah, my
They're
father
not
said.
being allowed to be fought
by generals.
By generals and the appropriate people that know how to fight and win a war.
That is 100% it, Steve.
You didn't talk to my dad about Vietnam. Boy, that made him so mad.
Why would you
that
give
made
up a hill that you killed how many boys getting? We lost so many men.
Right.
And then we would give up the hill.
It
No,
was
you
terrible.
progressively take over South Vietnam and you march into North Vietnam. MacArthur had it right. We should have gone all the way up through North Korea into China. I'm sorry. Sometimes the hawks, especially the generals, not the politician hawks, but sometimes the generals have it right. We messed up by not taking all of Korea. Just going to say.
Do we not appreciate General Kane?
Mm-hmm.
That was a masterful plan.
120-something aircraft.
Not one was shot at.
And not one round fired because we moved in, we did our job, we got out. That is the foreign policy that I would advocate moving forward. I think we should look at that. Next week, we're going to dive into the land issue. So I wanted to do it this week. But
it's a really interesting issue.
Next week, I want your thoughts on the land issue. But I'm seeing this in the live chat. So at Further Everydayers, live chat on PSB, you can submit questions. I see a lot of questions about the modern Israel versus the spiritual Israel and the grafting into the root of Jesse versus the old tree. Would you guys like it if we actually made a theological episode next week? We'll deal with the land issue. And actually, there's a really interesting letter from Thomas Jefferson that I want to get into.
We've got so much content. How are we going to get it on?
There's no way to get it all done. But because we kind of went long on this, but you guys in the chat, tell us what concepts would you guys like us to see and to talk about as far as the root of Jesse. Is Israel, modern Israel, ancient Israel? Is there any correlation? And anything you'd like us to look up and research, because I think that would be a fascinating topic.
It would be.
The whole Ashkenazi Jew thing is a very interesting rabbit hole that can get very deep depending upon how you tread. Are they Mongolian Turks? Where did the Mongols and the Turks come from? Are they part of any diaspora? Are the American Indians part of the diaspora? That's a question. There's a number of different questions that we could kind of dive into and do a historical episode and a biblical episode. So put that down in the comment section if you want, because honestly, this is a show that we love to do, and we do it for y'all to provide apologetic answers.
That I think the Israel questions are really maybe very impactful for this day and time. I can see that.
Here's an interesting question I'd kind of like to ask the chat. John Arthur, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, real quick.
I'd like to ask is, how many people, and if you could answer, have heard about all of the Christians in Nigeria that have been being killed, but not being reported on?
I know. I know. That's
we'll talk about
just the other day, 200 were killed.
We'll talk about the folks in Hamas who voted for their leadership to go kill Jews, and they paraded naked, dead bodies of Jews, and then they purposefully used themselves as human shields. We'll talk about them, and they'll fill up the news cycle. And we'll talk about the Islamists who are intentionally cutting out pipes that the UN put in to move water. They complain they don't have water when they're using those pipes to send rockets in Israel. We'll talk about them all day long, but we won't talk about Nigerian Christians who are being slaughtered by the thousands by Islamic hordes. I don't know. Make the Crusades great again. I honestly am kind of to the point where I think stomping on some Islamic hordes is not a bad thing. I am becoming more of a religious zealot each day that comes by. Maybe the Catholics weren't totally wrong on the Crusades. In fact, I think it was generally.
Ouch, man.
I'm just saying.
Maybe
listen to you.
I'm just saying.
Maybe
the Knights, and by the way, as someone who actually
maybe the Knights Templar had something going for him there.
Pick up a book and read it. The Crusades were nowhere near as bad as your modern history has made it out to be, because it's a just war to defend people who are being killed by hordes of saying convert or die. I'm just going to say, but we will talk about the persecution of Christians, but also let us know what you guys think about Israel's. We could do an episode on Israel's grafting in, or us grafting into them. What is real? What's not? We can do that next week as well. And we'll look at what's happening with the sale of American lands. That's going to be fun and interesting. I do want to get to Nicki Knows Facts because she has some fun trivia for us today, and it's going to be a blast. But Nicki, if you could go ahead and pick this up.
Yes, I can. As soon as I get my paper here. Yeah.
This is Nicki's Knows Facts.
Well, I know we've had such an interesting time there. I didn't know if we were going to get to this or not. But
Well, I wanted to make sure I got to you. It's going to be cut number 8, bud.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about mystery, things that disappear without explanation. I love a good mystery. I know y'all love a good mystery. And what John Arthur and I were talking about last week were military vessels that go missing without any explanation. And so I started working on this, and one of the first things I came into was the Cyclops, the USS Cyclops, which was a naval ship in 1917. And it was during World War. Yeah, I see your Cyclops.
You know, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, Steve, how do we get to the point of naming a ship the USS Cyclops?
Well, it's 1917, you know, it was a little bit different back then.
No, but keep going, sorry.
Well, this was the ship was built in Philadelphia. Now, tell me if this is a big ship, because I think it is. 540 feet long, 65 feet wide. Is that pretty big?
At that time, it would have been a sizable ship.
Well, and it said it was enough to carry 12,500 tons of coal.
That's substantial.
So it fell under the command of the Navy in 1917 when we declared war on Germany. So on January 9th, this ship left in 1918, January 9th, 1918, left Norfolk, Virginia for Rio de Janeiro. And it arrived successfully on January 28th. It took 2 weeks to unload the coal and for them to load it back up. And then she departed for Bahia, Brazil, Bahia, Brazil. And it was the only scheduled stop before leaving for Baltimore. I cannot talk today.
You having trouble?
Do you want me to read
it?
I do.
Keep going. Muscle through it.
Yes. Now, she was expected. I promise you, I'm not drinking. I had nothing to drink today.
Let me smell your breath.
Back on task here. Let's go.
Pour another one.
Okay. So anyway, she was expected to arrive on March 13th, 2018. The last known...
Did you say 2018?
1918. The last known location...
AOC.
Yeah, I tell you. I needed more sleep last night, that's for sure. Okay. Anyway, the last known location of Cyclops was an unplanned stop at Barbados on March 3rd. She had 1,800 nautical miles to go. She never made it to Baltimore, Maryland. There was 309 souls on board. It's been over 100 years, and they do not know what happened to the ship. The weather was good. There was no wreckage. There was no bodies. These are one of the mysteries that people go, what happened? What could have happened? The second one is Flight 19. Everybody knows about the 5 bombers, planes that disappeared in 1945 during World War II. There was 14 men on board 5 bombers, and these guys this was their last training exercise before graduation. They were led by Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, and they were just going out to do a practice run and turn around. And somehow they got lost. The lieutenant said his compass wasn't working. They had all the kinds of things that they sent out a plane to look for him, couldn't find him. The last message they received was the lieutenant saying, all planes close up tight. We have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. They were never heard from again. No wreckage was ever found. They did send out some rescue planes after that message, and one of the rescue planes disappeared. Now, there was a report from a ship that said they saw a ball of fire falling from the sky.
Cultivator 63 says orbs. Maybe.
Say again.
Orbs.
Orbs.
As in UFO.
That's,
Well, you know what?
That's the first time I've heard that. That's interesting.
That's kind of where we're going. But anyway, this has always been a mystery too, because there was never any wreckage found, no bodies found, no explanation. And you know, this is really hard on the military to just say,
we have no idea.
We have no idea. How do you go and tell 309 families? We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. It's really hard. So go ahead, honey.
The one thing I was going to bring up, the USS Cyclops being a steamship and carrying that much coal, those ships, there's a lot of knowledge that has been gained over the years from accidents. How you use that coal will make a great impact on how well that ship sails, i.e., if I'm unloading all the coal from one side of the ship, how well does it float, especially in rough seas?
Yeah.
So I think that one can be explained. With regards to the 5 planes, that story is interesting. But I personally believe that many of these can be explained. Can they all be explained? I will say the comment by our listener there.
Who knows?
Who knows? That's interesting.
One of the men was heard saying, everything looks strange. The water looks strange. The sky looks strange. Everything looks strange. Now, does that mean strange as, I don't think I've ever been here in this part before, this doesn't look normal? I don't know. Or, many people thought that, okay, something was happening. Was there some type of magnetic force that was throwing out their compass? But did you get up the pictures there, Ryan?
Which one?
The Cyclops and the bombers?
Yes, he's been doing that.
Picture number 3 is these disappearances happened over what we know today as the Bermuda Triangle. I don't know, Steve, when you were a kid, I remember when I was in school, that was a big deal. Man, I remember they said nobody flies over the Bermuda Triangle anymore.
Yeah, you don't go anywhere near it.
And I remember
I watched Tailspin, Disney's Tailspin. It was the Bermuda Trapezoid.
Bermuda Trapezoid.
Bermuda with Baloo the bear.
I remember one of my friends from school was going to fly, and they were flying over the Bermuda Triangle, and I was terrified for her. I was just terrified. Well, where did the Bermuda Triangle get its name and fame? And this is really interesting because I'm thinking about my childhood and what I thought about the Bermuda Triangle with the information and the documentary,
all the shows, yeah.
Yes. I can't even speak.
Somebody had a triangle on the island of Bermuda.
I know. So actually in 1950, the first suggestion of mystery was by an article by Edward Van Winkle Jones of the Miami Herald. And this article was talking about unusual disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. And this article was distributed by the Associated Press and appeared in various American newspapers. Well, everybody loves a good mystery. Well, then...
I certainly do.
I know you do. I know you do. But the name Bermuda Triangle came up in 1964 in an article written by Vincent Gaddis in the pulp magazine Argosy. Pulp magazine kind of makes you go, yeah. But anyway, he popularized many stories about anomalies, paranormal phenomenon, like spontaneous human combustion.
Spontaneous human combustion.
Yes.
Spontaneous.
I believe it can happen.
Human combustion.
This is really interesting, my honey.
No?
I watched those protesters combust, but it wasn't spontaneous. They put gasoline on themselves, but that's another.
I've seen a guy in Colorado combust, but that was because of somebody else. Firebomb.
Keep going.
Anyway, so I don't know if you knew it, but more than 50 ships and 20 airplanes are said to have vanished in the Bermuda Triangle. Now, put up pictures 4 and 5. Here's some explanations. They think maybe there's a whirlpool out there, and it's sucking the planes and the
sucking
boats
the
down.
planes
There's a
in.
hole in
That's
the
crazy.
ocean.
It could be. And
Now, there is scientific explanation for that kind of thing.
Well, there's
There you
also
go.
you also have the Sargasso Sea,
Right.
and which is a
Right.
bunch of very, very dense foliage.
Yep.
It's like lily pads on steroids
Yep.
that gum it up and make ships eventually
down.
sit there and sink. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
well, here's the favorite. Go ahead. The next two pictures. It could be spaceships, aliens, and wormholes.
They're
Wormholes.
from Mars.
I like
I
the
know.
wormholes one.
That's why
you know,
Elon Musk wants to go there.
We've talked about close encounters of the third kind, though. Those are often stopped, especially the violent ones, by the name of Jesus Christ.
But you know what? It's so funny is
Yeah.
when I was a kid, this was a big deal, and
They're
I'm thinking
called demons.
it's just not a big deal anymore. It's
Yeah.
really not a
It-
big deal. But you know what? When I was reading it said, if you take the number of ships, this is a very highly traveled area. And if you look at other highly traveled areas, they have the same missing ships and things that happen in that area. So
It's not
Not-
really a phenomenon.
it's not. It's not. However, the Cyclops and the bombers,
down.
and I mean, they've even found ships in the Bermuda Triangle with nobody on it.
Yep.
Lost.
There is, and I'm going to try to find this. There was one documentary that I was watching regarding the Bermuda Triangle. And this guy was flying from the Bahamas to somewhere South Florida. And it went very quickly. And he got disoriented. And he thought he was toast. And he actually came through it. But he talked about, when we say wormhole, that kind of imagery was what he was describing.
It's almost like the veil of reality is falling. They can see something outside of, which again kind of leads us well into our next segment, which we kind of have to get into if we're gonna.
Well, let me just leave you with this.
Tie us up in a knot.
I'm gonna
Give us a bow.
next week we're gonna go to a different state who has a different area that has a lot of mystery to it, and we'll find that out next week.
Oh.
So we've got a vote for alien. We've got something weird weather potentially from Melissa Perry's, I believe. So we got a couple of ideas. We're going to talk about
I have a
Alaska
vote.
next week. Wait, what's your vote?
Demons.
Demons.
Yes.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it is kind of interesting to look at these stories. And there is something,
Demons.
especially when you get into the UFOs, close encounters of the third kind with aliens, you definitely see a lot of these instances where the person has what they feel like is a rod jammed up. Forgive me if you have kids in the room, close their ears. I'm going to give you 3, 2, 1. A lot of these close encounters of the third kind, you have demons with aliens having jammed something up their rectum. And would they have this incredible, they call it probing, right? What stops those encounters every time it's tried is, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, leave. And it stops. Which, by the way, world's smartest man will do something on this next week. He just came out, 270 something point IQ, right, Mr. Producer?
Yep.
And he came out and he says, we're actually in a simulation. I mean, we've all looked at it. We're in this diminuted reality and that God created. And someday we will be exposed to reality as it really is. The veil will be down and we're going to know what's true and what's not. And this hazy, thin, shallow, vapid reality that we see will be replaced, at least we will see differently, that there is something more real. And that is what C.S. Lewis was alluding to in The Great Divorce. So,
Nice segue there.
yeah, how'd you
Did
like
you like that? That was good.
Okay.
Oh, that was
The Great
so
Divorce.
cool, man.
We've got to finish the story of the man and his wife, the tragedian. So this is chapter 13. Next cut, Mr. Producer. 15, please. Okay, if you're just joining us, The Great Divorce is C.S. Lewis's allegorical representation of a type of heaven and hell and purgatory as they might be if the final judgment wasn't final, if parole was available, and God allowed the distance of hell to holiday on the edges of heaven. Seeing the beauty and majesty of heaven, would they be wooed by the angelic and glorified representatives of heaven calling out to them? Let me ask you guys a question. Near-death experiences. The Bible says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. How long after your heart stops beating
Does that take?
before you're actually absent from the body? even though your body is dead, how long? And Lewis takes careful points. Again, I have to say this every week in case you're just joining us, but Lewis takes great pains to say, this is not my eschatology, this is not my belief of the afterlife, but I think it's interesting. What if God, in his holiness, allows a large amount of time? And these people aren't, it's not quite purgatory that he lays out. And again, it's not really heaven we're dealing with, but this bleeding edge of where people can come to an understanding, they can search, they can learn about heaven and about God and accept his gift in those moments between this life and the next. What if that's a drawn out time? And Lewis says this is more of a thought experiment. Don't take it too literally. It's not what I'm saying. But I think it's worth looking at the pathologies of what we believe. Last week, if you remember, we were talking about a lady who is this beautiful woman who spiritually is just this sweet, loving, kind, genteel woman. And she's married to a man that constantly makes people feel guilty. He preys upon people's pity. He seeks to elevate himself, but he doesn't do it as himself. He has this alter ego, this tragedian, this actor. And you're going to hear that word, tragedian, is an actor who plays in a tragedy, tragedian. This tragedian is dwarfing the man, this man's ego. And Lewis lays out this really well thought out word picture of this dwarf of a man who has on a chain or a set of even puppeteer strings.
I was going to say puppet strings.
This fake man who is embellished and he is overly sentimental. He is very kind. He's very genteel, but it's all calculated to ultimately puff himself up. And he has been approached by his wife who says, look, I love you. Come live with me. And he goes, oh, it pains me that you would have been so terribly in position. You must have missed me sorely. And she goes, well, don't mind all of that. I'm with God. I've been very well, and I'm happy that you're here. And this man is teetering on the brink of hell because he has not accepted Christ. And she says, all you need to do is accept Christ. She says, I'm in love. Not in love romantically. I am dwelling in the presence of love himself. I have been well and hoping that you someday would be as well as I am. And he says, so you didn't miss me? And she goes, don't mind that. You're here now. I was in love. I was in heaven. I care for you now, but I don't need you. I need him. I've always needed him, and you have always needed him, and I want you to live in him. And this is where we pick them up. Because if you read chapter 12 with us last week, which was a very dense chapter, we're going to have to split chapter 13 in two because Lewis compares heaven and hell in a very beautiful way. So if you'll bear with me, let's go ahead and jump into, go ahead and pull up cut number 17, Mr. Producer. So we see this beautiful woman and her husband. He's split into two different people. One is the id, the ego of the man, and the other is his true self, hiding beneath the sickly veneer of a gentleman. This man seems only to desire his wife to quote unquote love him, but in reality, he wants to be validated. In the end, he will seek self-validation over Christ. Yes or no? Let's see. Let's go ahead and jump into chapter 13. Pause me if you want. So next cut, Mr. Producer. Now, the narrator says, I do not know if I ever saw anything more terrible than the struggle of the dwarf ghost against joy. For he had almost been overcome by the pleading of his wife. Somewhere, incalculable ages ago, there must have been gleams of humor and reason in him. For a moment, while she looked at him in her love and mirth, he saw the absurdity of the alter id, the tragedian. For one moment, he did not at all misunderstand her laughter. He too must have once have known that no people find each other more absurd than lovers. But the light that reached him against his will. This is not the meeting that he had pictured. He would not accept it. Once more, he clutched at his death line, and at once the tragedian, this false puppet, spoke. How dare you laugh at me, it stormed, to my face. And is this my reward? Very well, it is fortunate that you give yourself no concern about my fate. Otherwise, you might be sorry afterwards to think that you had driven me back to hell. What? Do you think I'd stay now? Thank you. I believe I'm fairly quick at recognizing when I'm not wanted. Not needed was the exact expression, if I remember rightly. From this time, the dwarf, the real man, never spoke again, but the lady still addressed it. Dear, no one sends you back. Here, in heaven, is all joy. Everything bids you stay. But the dwarf was growing smaller even while she spoke. Yes, said the tragedian, on terms you might offer a dog. I happen to have some self-respect, and I see that my going will not make any difference to you. It is nothing to you that I go back into the cold, gloom, and lonely streets of hell. Don't, Frank, asked the lady. Don't let it talk like that. But the dwarf, the real man, was now so small that she had dropped onto her knees to speak to it. The tragedian, the puppet, the false ego, caught her words greedily as a dog catches a bone. Ah, you cannot bear to hear it, he shouted in miserable triumph. That was always the way. You must be sheltered. Grim realities must be kept out of your sight. You who can be happy without me, forgetting me. You don't even want to hear of my sufferings. You say you don't. Don't tell you. Don't make you unhappy. Don't break in on your sheltered, self-centered little heaven. And this is the reward. She stooped a little lower to speak to the dwarf, which was now a figure no bigger than a kitten, hanging onto the end of the chain with his feet off the ground. What is Lewis painting the picture here of?
I'll tell you the one thing that really grips me about this. Free will is front and center on this. It's a choosing.
He's getting smaller and smaller.
Yes.
The real man is
shrinking,
losing.
Yes.
And so I had this discussion with a friend recently, and she said she did not want to go to heaven because she didn't want to lose her identity. She didn't want to become. Here's the thing. You have your false identity, the tragedian, the actor, the fake human, and then you have this man who's being dwarfed by his sin. And because he's building up this false ego, he's becoming more of a mockery of a man. He's becoming a smaller man, and he is losing himself. In Christ, you find yourself. You become more
That's right.
of the man or woman you were meant to become. You can continue to pump effort into this fake ego, this fake id, and you will lose who you really are to it. And in doing so, you make yourself this stupid, simpering individual, and you lose to your sin.
I can't help but think of that verse. He that exalts himself, I will abase. He that is abased, I will exalt.
So, continuing on, I believe this is cut number 21. That wasn't why I said don't, said the woman. I meant stopped acting. It's no good. He is killing you. Let go of the chain even now. Acting, screamed the tragedian. What do you mean? The dwarf was now so small that I could not distinguish him from the chain to which he was clinging. And now for the first time I could not be certain whether the lady was addressing him or the tragedian. Quick, she said, there is still time. Stop it. Stop it at once. Stop what? Using pity. Other people's pity in the wrong way. We have all done it a bit on earth, you know. Pity was meant to be a spur that drives joy to help misery, but it can be used the wrong way round. It can be used for a kind of blackmailing. Those who choose misery can hold joy up to ransom by pity. You see, I know now. Even as a child, you did it. Instead of saying you were sorry, you went and sulked in the attic because you knew that sooner or later one of your sisters would say, I can't bear to think of him sitting up there alone crying. You used your pity to blackmail them, and they gave in the end. And afterwards, when you were married, it doesn't matter. If only you will stop it. She's willing to forgive him. And that, said the tragedian, that is all you have understood of me after all of these years. I don't know what had become of the dwarf ghost by now. Perhaps he was climbing up the chain like an insect. Perhaps it was somehow absorbed in the chain. The man is losing himself.
Self-pity.
No, Frank, not here, said the lady. Listen to reason. Do you think joy was created to live always under that threat? Whoa. Always defenseless against those who would rather be miserable than to have their self-will crossed. This is the purpose of free will. This is the purpose of heaven and hell. This is why there's a great divorce. For it was real misery. I know that now. You made yourself really wretched. That you can still do, but you can no longer communicate your wretchedness. Everything becomes more and more itself. Here is the joy that cannot be shaken. Our light can swallow up your darkness, but your darkness cannot now, in effect, our light. No, no, no. Come to us. We will not go to you. Can you really have thought that love and joy would always be at the mercy of frowns and sighs? Did you not know that they were stronger than their opposites? He responds, love. How dare you use that sacred word, said the tragedian. At the same moment he gathered up the chain, which had now for some time been swinging uselessly at his side, and somehow disposed of it. I'm not quite sure, but I think he swallowed it. Then, for the first time, it became clear that the lady saw and addressed him only. Where is Frank? She said. And who are you, sir? I never knew you. Perhaps you had better leave me. Or stay if you prefer. If it would help you, and if it were possible, I would go down with you into hell. But you cannot bring hell into me. You do not love me, said the tragedian in a thin, bat-like voice. He was now very difficult to see. It'll be 26. I cannot love a lie. I cannot love a thing which is not. I am in love, and out of it I will not go. There was no answer. The tragedian had vanished. The lady was alone in that woodland place, and a brown bird went hopping past her, bending with its light feet the grass that I could not bend myself. So moving a little bit further into the story, this parade that is around this woman, glorifying what God has done in her life, leaves. And then the narrator who's witnessing all of this, to his surprise, says this. And yet, I said to the teacher, when all the shapes and singing had passed some distance away into the forest, even now, I am not quite sure. Is it really tolerable that she should be untouched by his misery, and even his self-made misery? The teacher responds, would ye rather he had the power of tormenting her? He did it many a day and many a year in their earthly life. This is a husband and wife. Well, no, I suppose I don't want that. What then? I hardly know, sir. What some people say on earth is that the final loss of one's soul gives the lie to all the joy of those who are saved. Ye see, it does not. I feel in a way that it ought to. That sounds very merciful, but see what lurks behind it. What? The demand of the loveless and self-imprisoned that they should be allowed to blackmail the universe. That until they consent to be happy on their own terms, no one else shall taste joy. That there should be the final power, and that hell should be able to veto heaven. I don't know what I want, sir. Son, it must be one way or the other. Either the day must come where joy prevails, and all the makers of misery are no longer able to infect it, or else forever and ever the makers of misery can destroy in others the happiness they reject for themselves. I know it has a grand sound to say, ye'll accept no salvation which leaves even one creature in the dark outside, but watch that sophistry, or it will make the dog in the manger the tyrant of the universe. But dare one say it, it is so horrible to say that pity must ever die. Ye must distinguish. The action of pity will live forever, but the passion of pity will not. The passion of pity, the pity we merely suffer, the ache that draws men to concede what should not be conceded and to flatter when they should speak the truth, the pity that has cheated many a woman out of her virginity and many a statesman out of his honesty, that will die. It was used as a weapon by bad men against good ones. Their weapon will be broken. And what is the other kind? The action? It's the weapon on the other side. It leaps quicker than lightning from the highest place to the lowest to bring healing and joy, whatever the cost to itself. It changes darkness into light, evil into good, but it will not, at the cunning tears of hell, impose on good the tyranny of evil. Every disease that submits to cure shall be cured. But we will not call blue yellow to please those who insist on having jaundice, nor make a midden of the world's garden just for the sake of those who cannot abide the smell of roses. You will say it goes to the lowest, sir, but she didn't go down with him to hell. She didn't even see him off to the bus. Where would ye have had her go? Why, when we all came up here from heaven by that bus, the big gulf beyond the edge of the cliff, over there, you can see it from here, but you must know the place that I mean. Next week, we're going to pick up on what Lewis thinks hell is like. And I'm going to give you a taste of it. Hell is so small by comparison to the reality of heaven that going into hell does not make sense. Once you have experienced true reality, you've experienced the change of heaven. It does not make sense for God to descend into the lake of fire. We could talk about Hades. Christ went into the Abraham's bosom. We can talk about that. But the idea, and this is my takeaway from this, the universe cannot be held captive by the dog in the manger. Kind of fits with what we talked today about Iran.
Yes.
We can continue to hold ourselves captive by these people who do not want peace. Or we can say peace through strength. Final thoughts for the day, Miss Nicki. Do you have any thoughts on what we just talked about or anything else?
Well, I do like the Great Divorce. It's funny because you're sharing how he was trying to use pity to hold her captive. And Charlie and I have a family situation right now. And, you know, one of the things that turned me off a lot is people who play the victim to manipulate you. And we're kind of dealing with that in a distant family member. Not with us, but we're watching it from a distance. And it happens more often than you know. That people use, you know, I'm a victim, have pity on me, and then I hold you captive with that. And I don't have the stomach for it. And I might not be a very nice person about it either.
Well, after a certain point, you start to realize that the God of the Old Testament, I don't know. I'm sorry. How many children sacrificed to Molech can you allow before you say no more? Right. There's a point where wiping out that civilization of 10,000, 30,000 people, whatever it is, wiping them out, 10 million. If they're breeding every year just for the sake of putting children on a burning pyre, there's a point where you actually say in cold, calculated human death numbers, if they will not change because they've allowed confusion into there comes a point where the annihilations, and by the way, not every Canaanite tribe did God say to annihilate. It was only specific ones, the ones that were the worst. There comes a point where the cold human numbers actually work out. It's better to wipe out that civilization than to allow them to continue to go. There comes a point to have heaven, you have to say, there's God's will is going to be done. And you're going to have to accept that, or you're going to have to be cast out. It's one or the other.
Charlie?
There's a couple of different things to come to mind. The first thing I talked about when it came to the Great Divorce, free will. Free will. God is going to bring you to a place in your life. He will do it in a multitude of different ways, multitude of different situations. But he's going to bring you to a place where you're going to have to make a decision. And I think that's important. Number two, I'm very thankful. We don't have to agree with Trump on everything. Don't have to. Whether you agree or disagree, you should understand he's a strong leader, and you should be able to rest.
Real short.
30 seconds.
Just that, if you're going to wallow in self-pity like this dwarf, you're doing nothing than being just like a pig in a pen that wallows in a mud puddle that is full of pee and his own feces. You're doing the same thing.
That's what sin is.
It's exactly right.
That's what sin is. And so at the end of the day, do you want the promise of heaven, or do you want to wallow in your own pig pen? And you can decide. And that is the purpose of the gospel. Hopefully you guys had a great day today. Wish you well. You have a beautiful week.